Welcome to the Prose Classroom. I'm your host, Shanna Landgrave, and I am here today with Buzz Hirsh, the producer of Silkwood, a motion picture that in 1983 was nominated for 5 Academy Awards. Buzz, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about Silkwood and how you got involved with that wonderful project?
I was a graduate student in the film program at UCLA. When I read the first article in the New York Times about her death, and that was...
and you're speaking of Karen Silkwood.
Karen Silkwood, yeah.
Yes.
And I thought the story, which was, about half a column long, was really intriguing. A 28-year-old woman who worked at a plutonium reprocessing facility was killed en route to a meeting with a reporter from the New York Times to supposedly deliver documents that would have been incriminating to the company that she worked for, the Kerr-McGee Corporation, which is this huge multinational energy corporation. The documents that she supposedly had in her possession were missing from the scene of the accident. She was killed. And I thought it might be the basis for a very interesting film. And when you're a film student, you think of everything in terms of whether to make a good film or not. I sort of tracked the story. There were additional articles that were published by this reporter from the Times. His name was David Burnham. He, in fact, was the guy that she was supposed to meet that evening that she met her demise. And David Burnham himself was a very interesting person. He was a Pulitzer Prize winner. He's the guy that broke the Knapp Commission story about police corruption in New York City. That was what the movie Serpico with Al Pacino was based on.
Brave gentleman.
And David Burnham had been writing a series of articles about the fact that weapons-grade plutonium was turning up missing from these reprocessing facilities all around the country. Privately run facilities as well as government-run facilities like Rocky Flats in Colorado. Well, that was very interesting to me. I didn't know a lot about plutonium. I knew it was the stuff that you make bombs from, but beyond that I was pretty ignorant. So I started to research plutonium. And what I began to learn really put the hook in me. To give you an idea of how toxic it is, if you were able to take just a handful of plutonium oxide and go up on top of the Empire State Building, say in New York, and just release it into the air and let the wind kind of disperse it, it would kill every living thing in the entire state. And then nothing could live there for 250,000 years, which is much longer than the history of civilized man, on this planet.
Yeah, complete devastation.
So I also learned that the Kerr-McGee facility where Karen worked was making plutonium fuel rods, which were to be sent up to Hanford, Washington, where they would be put into the core of a breeder reactor. Breeder reactors breeding more and more plutonium, and this fuel, if you want to call it that, traveling all around the country by truck and by rail and by air. And when it only takes one accident to wipe out a huge part of the country, I thought, who knows about this? I mean, because
the danger level for our civilization is just astronomical.
That was disturbing, to say the least. And I began to more and more feel that Karen Silkwood's story was the perfect dramatic vehicle for bringing a strong anti-nuclear, specifically anti-plutonium message.
Yes.
I started to seriously think about making a movie based on her life. And, well, that's kind of a long-winded answer to your question. I haven't really even gotten started yet.
Well, you hold that thought. We have to go to a commercial break. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We are here with Buzz Hirsh, the producer of Silkwood. Before we went to the commercial break, you were talking about how dangerous plutonium is in a small dose. And even in a handful of plutonium that could be released into our atmosphere, and what devastating effects it would have upon our civilization, the people, plants, everything around us. Whenever you learned about the power of this destruction, it motivated you, didn't it?
Yeah.
What did you do with that motivation? How did that turn into a 5 Academy Award nominated motion picture, Silkwood?
I wrote a treatment. And I wrote it based on just news articles that I read, sort of filling in the blanks with my imagination. I then had a rare opportunity, it was luck really, to show this to a guy who had the money to put up to finance development of the project. And he liked it. He thought there was potential there, and so he gave me the money to go to Nederland, Texas. I went there to meet Karen's father, Bill Silkwood. And I wanted to meet with him because I wanted to try to obtain through him the rights that I needed to acquire to tell Karen's story. He was the guy I had to convince because he was the executor of Karen's estate. I spent a couple weeks down in southeast Texas hanging out with Bill Silkwood. And at the end of those 2 weeks, he agreed to negotiate with me. To let your viewers in on a little bit of the legal strategy, I went down to Texas armed with 2 contracts. One was for the rights that I needed to acquire from the estate, but the other contract was one for Bill Silkwood, sort of hiring him as a consultant on the film. It's a way of sort of greasing his palm and getting him, receptive to the deal. So finally nailed down the rights. Well, let me back up. I should say that those 18 months that I spent mostly in Oklahoma, I spent doing exhaustive research. I tracked down everybody who had known Karen and had worked with her and had been active in the union with her, and I interviewed them on tape and often with Super 8 camera. I ran into a lot of resistance initially trying to talk to these people. They were very reluctant to speak to me, and I learned quickly that it was because they were frightened of Kerr McGee.
Right.
Kerr McGee is very powerful in the state of Oklahoma. Their headquarters in Oklahoma City literally overshadow the whole downtown. They sponsor the Little League teams, they built the hospital, the library, they kind of run Oklahoma. And have for...
And Karen Silkwood did die under questionable circumstances.
Right, while employed by Kerr McGee.
Yes.
I made a breakthrough by befriending and spending a lot of time with Karen's boyfriend, Drew Stevens, and I got him signed up first. And once he was on board, he helped get me to the other people I felt that I needed to interview, and I guess they trusted Drew, and they figured if Drew was on board, well, then they could talk to me. But all along the way, I had to give assurances that everything that they told me I would keep confidential. It would be used only in the preparation of a film. Meanwhile, Bill Silkwood, Karen's father, had been trying to get a congressional investigation off the ground into the mysterious circumstances surrounding Karen's death. And it looked for a while like there was going to be an investigation. This was only after the NOW organization, the National Organization of Women, became involved, and they went out and collected about 365,000 signatures, and this was presented up on Capitol Hill, and it was decided that there would be a congressional investigation. But on the eve of when those hearings were to begin, the guy who chaired them was paid a visit by Dean McGee, head of the Kerr-McGee Corporation. We don't know what happened behind closed doors, but the chairman of the committee came out and called a news conference and said he was calling off the hearings. Gave no reason. After that happened, I convinced Karen's father that the only recourse left open to him was to file a federal lawsuit, and he did. He filed a federal suit against Kerr-McGee and the FBI, accusing them of conspiring together to cover up the facts surrounding Karen's death. And now, as defendants in that federal lawsuit, Kerr-McGee began to subpoena witnesses and call them in for depositions. And now, the first 4 or 5 witnesses that they that they get into that grand jury room and start to question, my name comes up in their testimony, and they quickly learn that I have been on the scene the whole 18 months previous, doing research into Karen, and a lot of documents and things have been given to me. And Kerr-McGee figures, well, if we can get Hirsch's research, we can save ourselves a lot of trouble. Besides, many of these witnesses that they called in to testify weren't being cooperative. So I was given a subpoena. And I was commanded to turn over all of my research. And I felt like I just couldn't do that.
This is fascinating because here you initially started out with the goal of going in and making a motion picture based on the true story of Karen Silkwood, and are now being brought in for a federal court hearing because you have gathered so much information to put on your motion picture that it actually has become evidence in the court hearing.
Right. It gets better.
Well, you hold that thought. We have to go to a commercial. We will be right back. Don't go away. We'll be back with Buzz Hirsh.